Welcome to the sourdough trials. The last month of summer got away from me, so I haven't been baking with sourdough, and my starter has just been stashed in the refrigerator. This one is very pourable as I measure out 50 grams to feed my starter for the first time in several weeks. I feed it as I normally do with 50 grams of starter, 100 grams of water, and 100 grams of flour. 80 grams of the flour is all-purpose flour, 10 grams of rye flour, and 10 grams of white whole wheat. Give it a good stir and then leave out to rise until about doubled or peaks and starts to fall. My discard jar, however, has been sitting so long that it started to develop hooch, this liquid that forms on the top. It's not harmful and there's no mold growing, so you can either stir it in or dump the hooch and then feed your starter, or use it as needed. Because there wasn't a lot, I just stirred it in and then added the rest of my discard to the jar. I gave it one more good mix, and then the next morning I made sourdough discard pancakes. My fed starter is now ready to use. I started with 80 grams of starter, about 300 grams of water, grams of bread flour, and 7 grams of salt. Once it's mixed into a shaggy dough, I cover it and rest for 30 minutes. This is what's left of my discard jar after I made pancakes, so I need to remove up down to 50 grams in my starter jar so I can feed it once again. Once it rises and doubles, it goes back in the refrigerator until I'm ready to use it again. I decided to make this loaf an olive loaf, so I started with 1/3 cup of this olive salad. I added it to my dough during the stretch and fold process. The last time I used an oily product, pesto, it was a mess. At that time I had added it during lamination so the dough didn't stick together. By adding this olive mix right to the dough as I stretch and fold, it was able to be more incorporated into the dough. I also added chunks of shredded cheese. You can see that while the dough is still a little oily, it is much easier to work with. After my dough had risen, I put it in the banneton and into the refrigerator overnight. The next day you can see that the oil has been absorbed or soaked up either by the towel or by the dough itself. I spread out the rice flour. Give it a couple of slashes and decorative marks. And because of the oil and inclusions, I'm doing this in my Dutch oven rather than open baking so it doesn't leak into the oven. This one wasn't big enough, so I switched it out for the larger. Now it will have room to grow. My first impression is that it looks pretty good, but maybe a little bit flat. I let it sit for a few hours before cutting into it. I'm not quite there on the interior. There are lots of holes and an irregular crumb. But as usual, it still tastes good and made a pretty good sandwich.